To understand the cloud usage scenarios, you really have to kind of take a tour of everything that cloud service providers can do these days. And they can do a lot. There's more every year. I've taught a lot of AWS material over the years. And literally, I only teach it maybe 4 or 5 times a year. So every time I teach it, I end up having to look again. What's new now? If I haven't had the chance to look. And the reality is you use what you use. So you're not always looking at what's new, but people ask questions about it. So you need to understand the newest thing that they offer. And they're always adding something. So it's important to understand the different cloud service offerings, what kind of uses are available and use cases are available. And there's important terminology. So first of all, we have the concept of subscription services. And what that means is you're paying as you go. You do not buy something like we used to buy a server, and then we might buy a license for an operating system and a license for an application that runs on that server. And then those 3 things are purchased. If they were licensed for life, for use on a single server, you were done. You paid everything you had to pay. And of course, you paid a lot up front. So there was large CapEx. And today with cloud, many people do not even consider their cloud costs CapEx. They consider it OpEx, and they budget for it a different way. But others still budget it into CapEx on an annual basis or something like that. But basically, you pay a monthly, maybe a quarterly subscription. In some cases, you can pay for an entire year's use in advance and things like that as well. But they are a subscription service. They also provide for identity management. So when you get access to the cloud service provider, you don't have to give everybody admin level access to the cloud that accesses it. Some can be at different levels where they only have access to certain servers or certain services or certain databases and so forth. So you have the ability to perform identity management. You also have provisioning. And provisioning simply means the ability to initiate an instance of something. It might be a server, it might be a database, it might be a service, it might be a function, but you're initiating an instance of something. And for example, when you initiate instances, most of the major cloud service providers actually have templates for different configuration sets that are complete, or at least just operating systems. So you can go in and say, I want a new instance. I want it to be running Windows Server 2016 for some reason. Or I want a new instance running Ubuntu, what have you. And you can even say, I want you to install an instance of this Linux operating system running these 3 open source packages. And it's just ready to go as soon as you start it up. Then we have auto scaling. This means that you don't always have to intervene when scaling up, out, or down is required by your application. The cloud service provider can monitor it for you. Of course, they're using automated systems to do this, and then add more instances, turn off instances, whatever needs to be done to constrain the cost of utilization for you. Because there's no sense in running an instance if I don't need it. But let's say every 2 weeks, I've got a very intensive process that runs against my very large database. Between times, it's just 10 or 15 users modifying data. But for about 4 hours, there's intensive analysis that's done every 2 weeks. Well, I could actually spin up a cluster of servers to do that work every 2 weeks, get it done quickly, get my report done, and then move on. We also have the concept of being hyper-converged. So convergence is about coming together, right? Hyper-converged is an extreme coming together. And the concept of cloud technology is that you're bringing your resources together into one area or location. And it's very important to understand the impact of this if you run private cloud, because your data center communications become quite intensive and much heavier than they used to be. And there are technologies beyond the scope of this course that are used in such network infrastructures, but you might want to look really close at something called a VXLAN, a virtual extensible local area network, if you end up running a private cloud. It can really enhance the performance of your more intensive data center. Now let's talk about AI in the cloud. Everybody wants to talk about AI these days, right? It's the coolest, most amazing thing. It's brand new. We didn't have it before. I have to laugh because let me give you some ideas of AI, and it's genuinely AI. When you probably a good 20 years ago now went to Amazon, maybe even before 20, When you went to Amazon and you bought a book, remember when Amazon was just a bookstore? Some of you that watch this are probably young enough that it's never just been a bookstore in your entire life. And that just makes me old, but Amazon was just a bookstore in the beginning. And then they started selling literally everything. Well, even when they were just a bookstore, they already had this. So I'm sure it was over 20 years ago. You would add a book to your cart, and then it would tell you, early on, it would tell you usually in the cart, people who bought this book also bought this other book. And then eventually it became added to just when you look at a product, it immediately shows you other products that people often buy with this. You know how you can bundle things together? That is what's called a recommender system. That is artificial intelligence. We've been using it for years. OCR, object character recognition. That is artificial intelligence. It was literally born out of artificial intelligence research. They developed OCR and then the world implemented it. And I remember the early days of that when it was painfully slow to do its function in the early 90s when we first got it on most of our PCs, or at least if we wanted to buy it, we could get it for our PCs. So OCR is AI. Yeah, we've been using AI for a long time. Machine learning is used in industrial systems and in all kinds of environments. What's different now about the newest AI is anyone can open a web browser and interact with an AI system. And that's new, and there's a coolness to that, which has caused a lot of interest, and it does bring some value we didn't have before as well. So what about AI in the cloud? Well, we have text recognition, meaning that OCR stuff I just talked about can be taken care of in the cloud. Text translation, really, really good these days. I remember when translation was first added to a few online websites and things, and it was not the best to say the least. But over the years, it has just become really phenomenal. Visual recognition, the ability to visualize and see a human, maybe even recognize a specific human, and dogs and trees and flowers and so on. Sentiment analysis, this means the ability to recognize the attitude or feelings behind a comment. So on social media, you can say, hey, go through all these posts, these 4 million posts, and only tell me those that are negative in sentiment. Voice to text or text to voice is a big thing these days as well. All of these being AI. And then we have generative AI, the one that's so exciting to everyone. That's based on these large language models. It's based on reasoning capabilities and many new technologies that come out every 3 to 6 months or so. Now we also have machine learning in the cloud. Machine learning is technically a subset of AI, and so it's a very specific kind of AI, just like generative models or large language models are a subset of AI. ChatGPT is not AI. It's a kind of AI. So AI covers many different areas. General artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence would be the attempt to have something intelligent enough to bundle all types of AI together. Like I do in me. So ML in the cloud, we have product recommendations, that's machine learning. Traffic prediction, predicting, for example, how busy your website's going to be on Black Friday this year based on what it was last year and what last year's average traffic was leading up to Black Friday compared to this year's traffic. So you can imagine all the massive data you'd have to look at to try to figure that out and calculate it yourself with Excel or something like that. AI can do it for you. We have deep learning, which is a special kind of machine learning, which has more complex architecture in its implementation. I'll leave it at that because you don't really need to know more for the Cloud Plus level of deciding which service you need to use in a cloud provider based on what it provides. And then we have, of course, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is huge today. We're expected to have somewhere in excess of 70 to 100 billion at least IoT devices around the world by 2030, and probably between 130 and 150 billion. So almost certainly between 70 and 100 billion, there would have to be a major economic collapse worldwide to prevent at least 70 billion. So between 70 and 100 billion is almost certain. And between 130 and 150 billion is actually very likely. That's a lot of devices that need to be managed, that need to have someplace to send their data. And all the cloud providers are rushing to say, we've got the best solution for you to track your IoT systems. So they work with sensors and gateways. So the sensors detect things about the environment, send that through the gateway to the cloud provider. They have transmission protocols, which could be things like there's one called MQTT that's popular, and almost every cloud service provider supports that. We also have AMQP, we have CoAP. There are several different protocols that are used for IoT communications. And the communication itself, of course, is about the message. What are we actually communicating? And there are some standard structures for that are commonly used, like JSON formats. That's the JavaScript object notation. There are XML formats that are used, sometimes simple CSV files or comma-separated value files and so forth. The cloud IoT services then are the things that plug all this stuff together and actually make it work. So what is IoT really? Well, here's a good visual representation for you. You've got your IoT devices, temperature sensors, light management, meaning that it's not just about sensing whether the lights are on, but turning them on automatically. So in the IoT space, we have sensors and we have actuators. A sensor just reads the environment, learns the environment, senses the environment. An actuator changes something. It flips a switch, it turns a dial, it can open or close doors or windows, turn machines on or off, etc. And then you have the network, of course, which locally is usually going to be either wired or wireless, so either Ethernet or some type of wired protocol used in industrial networking, like CAN bus or Profibus or something like that. Or it'll be wireless, like 802.11, 802.15.4. Zigbee also uses 802.15.4. Bluetooth, cellular, Sigfox and LoRaWAN are long-range IoT protocols. So those are the local protocols. Then they'll go through a gateway to some central monitoring, alert, and control system. The point of the cloud is that the cloud is taking over much of this monitoring, alert, and control.